Now for this course section, I'm going to continue with the project I shared with you in the previous section. You find the latest snapshot attached. And there, of course, we already wrote some tests and we also already worked with some mocks. But now I want to focus on this DOM.js file. Because in there, I have a function, showError, which takes a message, which then reaches out to the DOM to select an element, and then it creates an element, sets the text content of that element, clears the first element that was selected, and then adds the newly created element as a child to that other element which was cleared before. So it basically outputs an error message and clears any existing content that might already have been there. And the problem with this function and with testing this function, of course, is that this function relies on the DOM. We rely on the existence of the document object, and then we use the document object and certain methods provided by that object to interact with the DOM. For example, to select elements or create or add elements. And that can be a problem when writing tests. Why can it be a problem? Well, for one, it's of course a side effect. However, unlike working with the file system or a database, it wouldn't be a side effect that causes any persistent problems, because if we add an element to a HTML document, it will be gone the next time the original document is loaded. So any changes made through JavaScript won't persist if the page is reloaded. So it's not a persistent change. Nonetheless, it is a side effect and we therefore might want to avoid working with the real DOM, but that's not even the biggest issue. Instead, the biggest issue is that when we run our tests here through npm test and therefore by using vtest or jest, then we're not actually using a browser. We are running this from inside the command line after all. So there is no browser and there therefore is no HTML page and no DOM. I can show this to you. If we add a dom.test.js file, and in there we write a first test, which we'll revise later, but if we write a very simple test here, and I simply execute showError in that test, like this, and I pass some message to it. If I have this dummy code which calls this showError function here, then you will see that if I execute my tests, this will fail. And if we take a look at the reason for why it fails, we see that document is not defined. So in the end, it's this code which relies on the existence of the document object which fails. Now what we could do to work around that is something similar to what we did with the fetch function. We could provide a global stub, a global mock object. We could build our own document and then use vStubGlobal to set the global document object to our own document object. We could do that. That would work. But of course, unlike the fetch function, the document object is a very complex object with a lot of logic, a lot of methods, a lot of properties, and building our own testing clone might therefore be tricky. It might sometimes be an option, but not always. Now, because it's such a common problem that you have tests for browser-side JavaScript code, and you therefore want to be able to interact with the DOM, for example, both vtest and jest support the DOM virtually, so to say, out of the box.